You can do some things to make your percussionists think that this is a really nice high-end drum, and maybe even trick them into treating it a little bit nicer. This is a CB700 snare drum. It's not a name brand that people recognize usually. I've actually had a CB kit before. The wooden shells aren't anything exciting, but the hardware that comes on them, the lugs, are always really heavy duty. Honestly, is about half the battle. It's got 10 lugs, which means that the more lugs you have, the more evenly you can distribute the tension on the head. Typically, the idea is you can get a more pure sound. This is a good drum. The reason I bring that up is because I think it's worth investing a little bit of money into making sure this thing works well. First thing I see is the throw off is completely loose. I found that there should be a rivet in there keeping those together, and it's missing. That's the main problem. But I started looking around on the drum, and there's a few things I've noticed. One in particular is you can see those snare wires, or there's a couple that are coming up. That's not a huge deal to me because I understand you got a budget. You can't spend a ton of money on like a nice new set of snare wires. I actually have a set of snare wires that I bought off Amazon. I was buying this huge snare wire for another project I'll post. And while I was on there, I found these really cheap. It was a pair of 2 snare wires for like $8, and I thought, well, what the heck? We'll see. Maybe I'll use them someday. So I think I might replace those with these. If you can't replace them, it's not really that big of a deal, but aesthetically, when your percussionists look at it, they're going to think, oh, this is a crappy drum. Look at the wires. The other thing I noticed is there is a bend in the rim there. That part there is like dented in, so it probably got dropped at some point. Another thing I will do is I'll take my fingers and just kind of go around the edge of the drum and check if there's any. For some reason there's no tension here, so I'll check. Tension rods are in strong. What's the problem? I started taking a closer look at it. If you look over here, the rim is where it should be, but over here there's a big gap here. Underneath there, in between, that's the metal rim that the hoop that goes around. That's not good. That means that this rim is bent kind of past repair. I've seen people attempt to fix metal rims, and I've never seen anybody to really do it successfully. They usually end up just buying a new rim. If you can afford to buy something a little bit nicer, get a little bit heavier duty rim, I would say it's worth it. Again, I think this is a good drum. It's worth putting the money in. The muffler, but this part down in here is to the side. You can't use it. So that really just needs to be taken apart and then put back on properly. And then there's some little pieces that are like floating around in this drum. I don't know what that's from. First thing I'm going to do, just to get it cleaned up a little bit, is I'm going to take some Windex and paper towels. I'm going to wipe off the top head. A lot of that buildup is just dirt. Take a little time, clean off. You'll be amazed because it won't look like a brand new head, but it'll look a lot better and give the kids maybe a little more thought into, like, oh, that's, you know, something I need to be careful with. I will say, don't go too hard. Just wipe it off to the point where the dirt comes off. Once it's relatively clean, don't keep going, or else you will start to rip off the finish. When these coated heads get wet, they will peel. I have one gig where I got caught in the rain and I had coated heads on my drum set. We pulled the drum set inside and we kept playing, but they were still kind of wet, and it tore off all the coating was ripping off every time I hit it. Once you've wiped it down, take another paper towel, a dry one, and just wipe it dry, and then let it sit for a while so that you don't rip off any more coating. thing, once I started taking it apart, I realized there's a lot more repairs that could be done. It's pretty evenly, you know, going across the side of the rim there. Now when you look at this one, it's really hard to see maybe on the camera, but can you see how it's kind of flat right about here? Difference between that and that would be most likely from a kid dropping it. After really looking at the shell, I realized that 8 out of 10 lugs were dented in. When it's a small dent, I can just take a hammer and kind of pound it out a little bit. But with how many dents this was, I just didn't feel good about doing that. So I took it to the music store and I had my repair tech take care of it, and he got it all laid out. It's never going to be perfect because metal expands when it bends. And that's the same way if you bent a bell on a trumpet or anything like that. Now there are guys who get it really close, but it will never be perfect if it's bent extremely. I took it to the music store, they got it all cleaned up. Now I'm moving on to painting it. I've always loved the look of the Black Beauty snare drum, so I'm trying that out today. Let's see if I can get this to work. I'm using this right here. I hope that the kids, when they see it, are going to think, wow, this is like a new snare drum. This is like something really awesome. That's my hope, because I think a lot of times kids see something that doesn't look very expensive and they just treat it like garbage because they're like, who cares? Tonight is construction night. Got my shell done. Got a movie from the library. I'm in quarantine. Let's do this. So this is the life of being a drummer. I was looking for an extra screw for the bottom of this because it was missing one. And I opened one of my drawers and found this, which is an old throw off from an old snare drum. Considering this one's in better condition than the one on here, I'm just going to switch it out. I don't know if everybody knows this, but where you place your drum head on the top says a lot about you as a drummer. If you put the throw off facing directly towards you, that generally means you're an orchestral player. One notch over, so that it's going at an angle, that typically means you're a marching band drummer. All the way on the side, that means you're probably a drum set player. For someone like me, what really stuck with me is putting it right to the angle, because I have that marching band background. I don't know if everybody knows that sort of thing, but if you are going to do it for a concert snare drum, typically you want to put it just the switch facing your stomach. Lot more went into this than I initially thought was going to be. As we got new top and bottom heads, I could have used the old ones, but I think the nice thing about this is when students come back to school, they're going to see the heads look brand new and the drum looks brand new. I'm hoping that that'll get some kids to have a little more respect for it. It looks like someone spent some money on it and they didn't cheap out. You know what I mean? But I'm really happy about this. We're going to take this to my wife's school actually tomorrow, and we're going to be doing some inventory because this whole quarantine coronavirus thing. So maybe you got some percussion equipment sitting around that maybe you want to spiff up a little bit or make it look a little nicer for next year so that your kids maybe will take it a little more seriously. Taking cheap like aluminum snare drums and painting them with that black, I put a lot of layers. I put like 4 or 5 layers of paint, and then I put 3 or 4 layers of lacquer on there. I want to make sure that it doesn't scratch easily. I know a lot of people are doing like e-learning and stuff, but if you have the time and you're bored, it makes you learn a lot about how the drums work. I also have a snare drum that a director actually was throwing out that I took with me because they wanted to get rid of it, and I feel kind of guilty for taking it, even though they were literally going to throw it in the trash. I'm going to do a video on that because I refurbished that. I want to show some other things that I did to kind of make that look better, so check that out.